Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. Hi, this is Bill. I thought this interview was so good, I wanted you to hear it again. So enjoy. And a warm welcome to the afternoon show. I'm Bill Arnold, and Dr. Andy Schuttinga is with me today, and we're going to talk about the psychology of fear. Now, it's a pretty primal response. It's biochemical and emotional. Are you a person that likes a good scary movie, or do you avoid that? Do you not like being frightened? Some people love it. Some people are adrenaline junkies, and they think that if you're living in a fear-based situation, you're having a good time. And for other people, they go, not interested at all, because fear sometimes involves physical and emotional symptoms. If you can get chills and dry mouth and rapid heartbeat and shortness of breath, and maybe you're the kind of person that likes that, and by watching a movie, you get that response, and somehow that is satisfying. And that's not for me, but we're going to talk about psychology of fear. And if you have questions or comments, let me know what it is. Andy would be more than happy to try to answer your questions. 877-933-2484. Andy is a professor of psychology at North Central University here in the Twin Cities. Andy, welcome back.
Hey, it's good to be back.
So I'm not a guy that likes going to scary movies. I'm just not for it.
Really?
No. First of all, scary movies don't scare me. Because what scares me are like commercials for toenail fungus. That scares me.
Wow.
But I mean,
wasn't expecting that one.
Yeah, I figured that. But the creaking door and you go, who's coming through that? I don't like those movies.
Really?
No, because I start to imagine them in my own mind in my own house, and I go, why would I do that to myself?
That's fascinating. I'm kind of surprised. I mean, I don't know a ton of people who love horror movies, but
come on, it's a huge business.
Yeah. It's amazing how many horror movies have made massive bank at the box office.
And they're like $10,000 to make, and they make like $10 million.
And very few of them are ever considered to be really high quality cinema.
Yeah.
I can't think of a single movie off the top of my head where it's like, wow, that was an excellent horror movie.
Yeah. So why are people attracted to things like that?
Because it makes them feel good.
Yeah, it is. I understand.
It really is. It's an emotional response.
Yeah.
That sends your body into not shock, but it's a jolt to your system. So the sympathetic nervous system lights up when you're like for a jump scare, for example. So you see the creaky door, and all of a sudden bats shoot out of it, or the serial killer character jumps out with a weapon. I guess we can't be too graphic on the radio here.
No, I don't want to.
Something scary happens, right?
Yeah.
And the whole point is for everybody in the theater or at home to jump. Right? You shriek, or you yell, or you attack the screen if you're that type of person. And your body is filled with adrenaline, and it's filled with dopamine, and it's a physiological response. And some people are wired to find that gratifying.
Okay.
They enjoy that feeling.
Well, if the chemical reaction in your brain is similar to the dopamine response you have from positive emotions like happiness and excitement, well, why wouldn't you want to do that once in a while?
Yeah.
Have that kind of that thrill ride of fear where at the end of the day, it's just manipulative.
Of course.
But how should we as Christians think about that stuff? Why would we want to put those thoughts and images in our head?
Well, there's a lot of ways you maybe don't.
No, I don't.
But the other thing you could do is go on a roller coaster, or go stand at the edge of a cliff at the Grand Canyon when it's windy. And, seriously, I mean, that's terrifying for people, right? I mean,
who talks that way?
Psychologists. You could find other, kind of more natural things that cause fear in your body or in your mind, that produce the same result as a jump scare in a scary movie.
Okay.
But even a scary movie doesn't have to be gory or gross or anything. There's nothing wrong with bats, and they do fly around in the dark. And if they jump out of a window or a door at you, it's maybe your fault for being in the bat's neighborhood, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
there's things like that happen to us that aren't necessarily gruesome or, we're close to Halloween. So actually it's Reformation Day, but most people consider Halloween, a major holiday, and they love the idea of being scary and scaring kids
Right,
and,
right.
not terrifying them. But people are drawn to that. And yeah, you could find that kind of stimulation in a lot of other ways that are probably healthier for you.
Way healthier. Dr. Andy Schuttinga is my guest. We're talking about the psychology of fear because a lot of people are drawn to that little thrill ride. I think when I saw the movie Jaws back in the 70s, it was just, there was fear all over the place.
Yeah.
It was scary.
It's a great movie.
It was a great movie, but, I didn't have nightmares after that movie,
No.
For the next 10 years.
Wow. That's a long time.
No. But it's, sometimes it's fun to see a suspense-filled movie.
Yeah.
That isn't, gory or anything that's bloody or mutilating or anything like that.
Right.
Just something that draws in your imagination and then keeps you at the edge of your seat. I'm okay with a little of that.
Oh, yeah. I
don't
enjoy that
like
too.
Paranormal stuff. I don't like
No.
anything that has any connection whatsoever to anything from the kingdom of darkness. I want nothing to do with
Yeah.
that.
I think that's probably pretty wise.
Yeah.
I don't go to haunted houses, for example, or not haunted houses, but, like haunted hay rides or, these terror-filled things that are meant to excite people. And I think a lot of people go because they actually do enjoy the fear factor, the getting scared part. I'm not sure everybody who goes to those actually enjoys the gore and the gristle that they have to watch. But if somebody comes running out of the forest with a weapon, people get excited about that. They get scared, and then
they know they're not going to get
laugh.
hurt.
Right, because they know they can suspend their disbelief for a short amount of time.
Of course.
And that's where it can be a really fine line for people between actual fear of a situation like that and suspended fear or suspended disbelief where, wink, wink, they know this isn't real and I'm not going to get terrified by it.
Right.
But a good movie that's actually well done will make you feel like it really is happening near you or to you.
Yeah. Now, when we talk about fear, Andy, is the fight or flight response, is that in the equation as well?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Say more about that.
Well, there's actually 3 responses. There's fight, flight, or freeze.
Okay.
And so what our body will do is the amygdala is the first part of your brain that gets the sensory information. So let's say, like if you're, and there's different contexts too, right? If you're in the North Woods of Minnesota, not Minneapolis, if you're in the North Woods of Minnesota and you're hiking and you hear a noise and you know that there's bears in the area and 50 feet ahead of you on the trail, you see a bear walk across. Well, that's when the fight, flight, or freeze instinct kicks in. Mm-hmm. And so your amygdala immediately sees the bear and makes a decision on what should I do? What should my response be? Mm-hmm. And if you've never thought a second about what a bear will do in the forest, you're probably going to flee. The bear will probably chase you, and the bear will probably make your acquaintance.
Okay.
Whereas if you've
Not
thought
the
about
best
it,
choice.
No, it's a terrible choice. Actually, you can't outrun a bear, and you never should. Nor should you climb a tree. You should just
I agree.
stand still and make yourself as big as possible.
Yes.
But on the flip side, though, when we see a bear, if you go to a zoo, they're cute and they're fuzzy and they're kind of big and lumpy and they're just not fearful, right?
They're lumbering around.
It's a totally
and you're
different
safe.
situation. Yeah, you're safe because there's a moat and maybe some bars or some thick glass that protects you, so you can watch that. So it's kind of interesting to see the difference of how we interpret things, and it happens in the snap of your fingers, right? The amygdala is very quick to make a rational judgment about what you're seeing in front of you. And some people, they really do, they freeze, right? They're stuck in a scary situation. They'll just stop. And some people run, and some people will actually attack and fight, which, you have to think about a little bit before you decide what you're going to do. But in the immediacy of a moment like that, we don't really have a choice unless we've thought about it ahead of time and have somewhat of a plan.
Mm-hmm. So as I look at so many wonderful verses in Scripture, Isaiah 41:10 is one I've memorized. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand.
Yeah.
Now, as we're talking about the psychology of fear, I think there are a couple of different categories we're going to discuss today, Andy. One being this side of the story, which is, people like a thrill. They go down a roller coaster and scream because that's scary to them, right?
Yeah.
There's some fear. There's some adrenaline is pumping.
Totally.
Some people kind of like a suspenseful movie, which I suppose, if it's not illustrating anything evil or unbiblical,
Right.
I guess that's okay,
Yeah.
I don't want to fill my head with that stuff, though.
Yeah, and I think that's perfectly rational and wise response. I mean, why would we want to fill our brains? Because you can't unsee things.
That's true.
You can't.
Images are so powerful.
They are. You can't unsee something.
Yep.
You can't. There's no reverse button, and our memories don't work that way. We don't have the kind of control that I think a lot of people would like to have over our memories, because oftentimes bad things or scary things that happen to us, we remember them really well because they're tied to emotion.
Yes.
Emotional memories are more powerful than bland memories.
Of course.
And
they're more specific.
Oh, yeah.
Because they happen
absolutely.
maybe once or twice or three times in your life, right?
Yeah.
Or very significant, scary things.
Sure. You don't get into a major car accident 4 times a week.
No.
That's just not something that happens to people.
Have you been in a major car accident?
Yeah. Actually, I was.
Did the car get totaled?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was in 2nd grade.
Oh, wow.
Happened on a Wednesday.
You weren't driving, were you?
No.
Okay.
No, thankfully not.
You got your license in what, 3rd grade?
Yeah, roughly about there.
Yeah.
I was in school for a long time. That's how I became a doctor.
Yeah. So, but the whole idea that we remember those events so specifically because they don't happen that often.
Right.
I mean, I think of the time I was in a car accident and my car was totaled and I got sideswiped and what's it called, T-boned.
Yeah.
And that just comes out of nowhere and you don't see it.
Right.
Next thing you know, it's like being in the movies.
Yeah.
And you
don't have time to be afraid, though.
But you don't.
I mean, there's no time. You weren't scared.
I was scared afterwards.
Yes.
When I realized what had happened and what I was in the middle of,
Yeah.
that's when the fear kicked in.
That's the scary part. Yeah, fear is an interesting thing. I mean, it's a good thing. Fear is actually a good emotion to have because fear is your physiological response and your logical response to things that you should be wary of or things that you should be concerned about. Like that bear in the woods. You should be afraid of the bear.
Yeah.
Especially if it's big and hungry and maybe
They're
in
always
a bad
hungry.
mood. Yeah,
they're always hungry.
Yeah, they're always hungry.
There's no such thing as a bear that's not hungry.
Right. Or you should be afraid of, for example, if you're walking on the street and somebody approaches you with a weapon and says, "Give me your money," you should feel a sense of fear.
Complete fear.
Because it's an unknown.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're dealing with, and that's actually a rational, normal response. We're supposed to feel that.
Yeah.
And there's the fear of respect. Like I'm not afraid of certain things, but I respect their power. Mm-hmm. Like you shouldn't be afraid of a gigantic engine that's in a car or something like that, or maybe you are in possession of some powerful machinery. You don't have to be afraid of it, but you should be wary of it and have some sense of fear of what it could do if you mishandle it, like a chainsaw, for example. Mm-hmm. Now, should I walk into a shed and look at a chainsaw and say, "Oh, I could cut my leg off with that"? Well, no, of course not. That's not a rational response. That might be fear-based, but that's not rational. So fear is an interesting thing in that way because it can become very irrational very quickly, and that can cause us long-term trouble.
Mm-hmm. Psalm 34:4 says, "I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears." We're talking to Dr. Andy Schuttinga. We're talking about the psychology of fear. We're in one category of that fear department. We're going to shift when we come back to a couple of other categories. But if you have a question or comment, let me know. 877-933-2484. Somebody just said, "Hello, I'm with you, Bill. Horror movies put garbage in your mind." So that's a great comment. Thank you very much, Sylvia. All right, we'll be right back.
Well, you're loved. I get it. It might not always feel like that, but the truth is God knows you and where you are at all times. He actually loves you so much He calls you His. If you would like to discover, maybe even rediscover that relationship with Him, consider attending the Set Apart Conference for Women on March 8th and 9th. Go to setapartconference.com and register today.
Psalm 56, verses 3 and 4. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise, in God I trust, I shall not be afraid. What can flesh do to me? I'm talking to Dr. Andy Schuttinga today. We're talking about the psychology of fear. We started off talking about some of the more obvious ways to encounter fear, which are things like scary movies and that kinds of things, and
Bears,
and being encountered with someone maybe on a sidewalk or in a back alley, and those are all very normal reactions you would have. And
Totally.
God wired us that way to have that kind of fight or flight or freeze ability. So anyway, let's talk about some of the other fears that we have, which could be, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay rent this month. I don't know if I'm going to be able to feed my kids tomorrow. I don't know if my diagnosis is going to be healed.
Oh, yeah.
These are the big fears I think a lot of people have.
Yeah, absolutely. And those can obviously turn into long-term anxiety issues, which make it hard to, be happy and function every day when you've got things like that hanging over your head. And again, it's a fair and rational response to negative stimulus in our environment. And a negative stimulus is realizing that you don't have maybe enough money in your bank account. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything is a stimulus, right? I mean, every word you read, every voice you hear or sound you listen to, that's all stimulus. And those are things that I don't think anyone should point to that and say, oh, you don't need to worry about that. Here's a Bible verse that says, cast all your fears upon the Lord. It'll go away. It doesn't always work that way, unfortunately. It helps mitigate the fear, but it's still going to be there until we alleviate the situation, until you have the money to pay for your bills, until you have the wherewithal to get the groceries that you need to feed your kids.
But the verse will give you the confidence and strength to endure whatever you have to go through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think there's tons of verses in the Bible about this, right? There's verses about anxiety that specifically use the word anxiety and anxious, and do not be anxious, do not be afraid, do not be fearful. There's lots of guidance in the Bible about this. I don't interpret those verses to say you should never be afraid of anything, because then we probably wouldn't have fear as a rational response to most things.
Right.
I think fear can be a very healthy motivator. If I'm afraid that I don't have enough money, I might become motivated to go get a second job if I need to do that.
Or set your alarm and make sure you get up and get to work on time.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Because not all fears and things we're afraid of are caused by external factors. Some of them we cause for ourselves, and some of them are caused by other people, and sometimes it's stuff out of our control.
Mm-hmm. It's just putting fear in perspective. I love what Jesus said in John 14, verse 27, peace I leave with you. And if you have fear, you're looking for peace. You're looking for the removal of the fear. And to me, if fear is removed, you've got some peace. And Jesus says, peace I leave with you, my peace I give you.
Yeah.
This doesn't come off the shelf in the store.
No.
That's not store-bought peace. That's peace that comes right from Jesus himself. And he says, I don't give it as the world does. Do not let your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. So I'm going to just speak that truth today, just to say, God is going to give you peace.
Absolutely.
Yep, and you will not be afraid.
Yeah, it's a real gift that you said it perfectly. You can't buy it. You can't get it off the shelf at a store.
Nope.
And you can't take a pill that makes everything feel better. You can't. There's not medicine that makes all the anxiety go away. Some medicine can help with that, but in the end, you still have the base cause of your anxiety and your fear, which we all have to deal with. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't escape those things through any other means other than dealing with them and God's peace. Those are the two things that are going to bring you to resolution in the end.
Mm-hmm. A comment came in from a member of the faith family here. Irrational fear seems to be something to beware of, because that's what the media uses.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They specialize in irrational fear.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who struggle with irrational fear. They're afraid. They see things in the news and they worry that it's going to happen to them. even though it's incredibly, incredibly unlikely. There's all kinds of research that shows that people will pay a premium for insurance for things that statistically will almost impossibly happen to them. We will pay for, we'll pay for tornado insurance in an area that hasn't seen a tornado in 30 years or 40 years, thinking, well, it could happen. We fear flying in airplanes, even though you're far safer in an airplane than a car.
That's for sure. People
will drive. People are afraid of sharks, even though you're more likely to get struck by lightning multiple times than you are to get bit by a shark.
Right.
So there's a lot of irrational fear out there, and some of it's purposely pushed at people, and some of it's just, it's sensational to cover a plane crash because it's a terrible tragedy.
Horrible.
It's a horrible thing, but it rarely happens. Like, you think of the millions of flights every year and how many planes actually crash each year and kill people. Very, very few. But yet many people are afraid of flying, or they're afraid of dogs, or they're afraid of all kinds of things that are really irrational to be afraid of.
And when we take these fears and these irrationalities, if we want to call them, right to the Lord, Jesus says, I'll give you peace. And I can, Paul says, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your request be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus, because fear is living in your mind.
Absolutely it is.
That's where it takes up residence.
It does. I mean, you have a physiological response to fear situations, but then you do have a choice as to what you're going to do with it afterwards. And some people do have uncontrollable fears, and there's ways to treat that. We can talk about that at some point. There are ways to treat fear. There's ways to treat phobias, and there's ways to treat, people who are afraid of, going to the dentist, or afraid of flying, or afraid of snakes or birds or feathers. I mean, whatever it is that you're afraid of, whatever it is, we can essentially train that out of you using various different techniques.
What about if your dental office is on a plane and you're flying and getting your teeth worked on at the same time?
That's called flooding.
Okay,
that's an actual technique, for real.
Just to pile it all on at once.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's called flooding, and that helps you kind of, flush yourself of all your fears?
Yeah. Well, yes, because, okay, so here's how it works. Let's pick something common. Let's say you're afraid of spiders.
Which I'm not.
Okay, good. So this will work for you. If you're a listener and you're afraid of spiders, hang on, okay? Because we're going to do spiders. So flooding is when literally you would put somebody in a room or a small enclosed space with a bunch of spiders.
Oh, that's not going to work for people that are afraid of spiders.
But it will, because here's what happens. Your body will physiologically respond in probably even a violent way. You might start stomping on the spiders. You might, try to smash your way out. But here's the thing. Your body, your sympathetic nervous system will be firing on all cylinders, right? Your pupils will dilate. You'll stop digesting food. Yeah. Your pancreas stops producing stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of things that happen. But you can only do that for so long. And your parasympathetic system, which is like the parachute, you start floating down to normal.
Okay.
And what happens is when you've been flooded with all these spiders, you realize nothing happened to me. I'm okay. And now, should you do this with a therapist, right? Don't just go home and dump a bucket of spiders on your head and say I'm going to fix myself. No, don't do that. But, there's also systematic desensitization, which does the same thing.
That's true.
You start with something very small. Like I would say the word spider, and the client might say, don't say that. I don't like that. Okay, well, how do you feel right now? Well, I'm terrified, and I'm nervous, and my hands are sweaty. Okay, well, let's give it a minute. How do you feel now? Well, I don't feel so bad. Why? Because there's no spider here. I just said the word. And so you slowly build up a tolerance, and eventually you can probably hold a big tarantula in your hand and not be afraid anymore. This actually works.
I know that does work.
Yeah,
the desensitization method, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Takes time and effort.
And patience.
And a lot of patience.
And you just can't do it without some good guidance.
Yeah, again, this is not DIY. You don't want to go to reptile gardens and run around unfettered in there and see all the spiders and snakes at the same time. But you could, and those are for your, phobias and things like that. But, going back to the original segment point, What do you do about somebody who is constantly fearful of losing their house or not having enough to eat? That's a different thing. That's not systematic desensitization.
No.
That's an actual problem that needs to be solved.
Yeah.
And that's not irrational. That's life.
Or you fear losing your job.
Sure.
Job you've had for a while, and you think, well, maybe new management is moving me out. And then you go, then what? How's this going to work?
Then it's a matter of going back to logical thinking. How likely is it that I'm going to get laid off from this job? Yeah, there's new management. And they could bring in new people. Well, are you a senior level person? Mm-hmm. Well, no, not really. I don't actually work with those people directly, but they might fire me anyway. Okay, are you being logical? Is this a response that is thoughtful? And if it's not, then you have to decide how I'm going to decide to feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's some choice making involved in fears like that. And it's also a matter of looking and examining what the fear is and what it comes from. Mm-hmm. Are you afraid of losing your job, or are you more afraid of the stigma that comes with being laid off from a company?
Or the security of not having a paycheck?
Sure.
There's all kinds of fears.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Or, what are you more afraid of? A few months without a paycheck or embarrassment? I think a lot of people would be more afraid of the embarrassment because they feel like, well, I could probably find a new job. I have a job that I can find other places.
Yeah. It all depends on your age and stage of life, though, too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And this is why fear is kind of complicated, because it's so contextual. Where are you at in life? What are you truly afraid of in this situation? Is this a fear that's worth having? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Can you do some research, or can you talk to somebody who might have some control over what you're afraid of? If you're worried about losing your job, do you talk to your manager and say, "Hey, what's going to happen? I'm concerned." Mm-hmm. And they might say, "Oh, you don't need to worry about anything. Nothing like that is going to happen." Or they might be honest with you and say, "Well, your job is on the line.
Mm-hmm.
At least you know." Then you have something that you should deal with.
You've got data.
Right? You've got something that you can deal with that's tangible. And that's a really good way to help deal with things that you're afraid of.
There's a great comment from Diane. I'm looking at 2 Corinthians 10:5. We demolish arguments in every presentation that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ.
Yes.
Every thought.
That's a great verse.
Thank you, Diane.
Taking captive your thoughts is a hugely important thing that we are all generally capable of doing. And it can be applied to all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. Take captive your thoughts of being arrogant, or thinking you're super special, or thinking you're not worthy, right? It can go both ways. So there's all kinds of negative thoughts that we are prey to that we can control by taking them captive and saying, I'm not going to think that way. And that's how you do it. You kind of grab it by the throat and say, no, you don't have control over me. I know I'm afraid of this, but I'm not going to be anymore. That's also another healthy way of engaging your fear, is directing thoughts at it and saying, no, you know what? I see this coming. I'm not going to go down that road. I'm not going to be afraid of you. Thought. I'm not going to be afraid of this concept or this potential thing. Not going to do it.
I like that.
Yeah. It works pretty well.
Dr. Andy Schuttinga is my guest. We're talking about the psychology of fear. If you have a comment or question, please send it over. 877-933-2484. Again, 877-933-2484.
It's the afternoon show with Bill Arnold. Prime time, drive time. Let's get it started. Jump in your car. What's for dinner? It's the afternoon show with Bill Arnold.
We're talking today to Dr. Andy Schuttinga on the psychology of fear. And we all have fears, and we all deal with them differently. Some great comments are coming in from the faith family. Jean said, I have found that examining my self-talk is important.
Yeah.
Often what I'm telling myself is not rational.
Yeah. Good
Whoa.
work.
That is outstanding.
It is really good.
As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So
Yeah.
what we thinketh in our heart is pretty important.
Yeah. I think, therefore I am, which was totally a secular person who wrote that, but it's still true.
It's true.
Yeah.
So when we examine our self-talk, how do we deal with making sure we're not getting irrational?
By being honest with ourselves,
Okay.
and maybe forgiving of ourselves too.
What if you're tough on yourself?
Yeah.
What if you're really hard on yourself and you say, "All right, I really messed that up. I guess I fail a lot. I'm a flawed person." And then you get into a little bit of a pity party, and that's your self-talk. Then what?
Yeah. Well, the first part, I'm not sure that's always incorrect or even wrong, because sometimes we do dumb things, or we make big mistakes, or we say foolish things or cruel things to somebody else. And I think it's okay to sometimes say, "Oh, I really messed that up. I was not being a good person." Now, you notice what I said there? I didn't say I'm not a good person. I said I was not being a good person.
Okay.
And so it's important for us to differentiate making ourselves the mistake or making a mistake. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's easy for someone to say, "I'm a bad person." No, you did a bad thing. I did a bad thing is different than I am a bad person. On one level, of course, we're all sinful, so we are all bad people. But if that's the kind of self-talk that we're engaging in, I am the mistake rather than I made a mistake, that can have a really serious impact on us long term.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a particularly healthy way to think about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Andy, what's the difference between a normal fear response, because we all have them,
Sure.
and then when the normal fear response gets maybe twisted and it starts heading towards a phobia? What is the difference there?
Yeah, phobias make people act, again, in irrational ways.
Okay.
Excuse me. I show a clip in my general psychology class about fear and about phobias, and it's actually more about systematic desensitization in learning. But there was a woman in the video who was terrified of spiders. So in her small apartment, when she went in, she had a spider brush that she kept everywhere with her. She would wipe down every door frame before walking in. She would wave it around like a magic wand. She would wear a kerchief on her head or a hat. She would wear a face mask.
She sounds perfectly rational to me.
Right. She wore gloves with duct tape on them.
Okay.
She would duct tape her doors and windows
Okay.
for all the cracks so spiders couldn't get in.
A little phobic, maybe?
Totally phobic.
Okay.
Right? She
God
couldn't
bless her, but
go
that's
out.
a little phobic.
Yeah, she couldn't walk into the grass outside of her apartment building because she was terrified. That's phobia. When you are engaging regularly in irrational, fear-based behaviors, that's a phobia.
Okay. Now, if we are living in a time where we feel there is more need for our survival mechanism to be active, isn't that connected to fear?
Yes. I think I understand that.
Say more then. I mean, right now there seems like there's all this pressure in the world that finances and the different things are going on in the culture and all of these fear-based things that create a sense of stress and anxiety, but also how do I survive in all of this? How do I survive in the midst of all of this?
Yeah, that can definitely lead to feelings of fear.
Yeah.
I don't think that's you're probably not going to get any kind of a phobia level fear out of that. But and here's where these Bible verses come in handy. It's clearly telling us we shouldn't live like that because we're being afraid of something that God provides for us, not being there. We're afraid of, if we're afraid of not surviving, that's different. But if we're afraid of losing all of our money, or afraid of losing all of our friends, or afraid of, getting a severe illness, and you live in constant fear of that becomes an anxiety issue. And then that can become an anxiety disorder after a while. When your world is overcome by fears and anxieties, worries that are things that you really don't need to be worrying about, that's where we get into kind of long-term problems and issues with fear and anxiety.
Okay, so our brains are going to determine a threat,
Yes.
and our sympathetic nervous system is going to kick in to give us the appropriate chemicals to deal with it.
Right.
'Cause that's the way God made us.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
So there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing
No.
bad about that.
No, not at all.
It's when you allow those fears to overtake you and to interfere with your ability to enjoy life.
Yes. That's when you have an anxiety issue.
Okay.
So a few weeks ago, I meet with Gary and Brennan for financial advice. We've been working with them for years in South Dakota, who are probably listening right now, by the way. Hello, Gary and Brennan. If we meet with them and I'm overcome with the fear that they're going to lose all of our money for retirement and I can't shake it and it's just overpowering, that's not a normal response to that situation. Now, if Gary had said to me, hey, bad news, we're probably going to lose all your money in the next couple of months. Okay, now I maybe have something because he's an expert and he's telling me to be concerned about this. It's like when people watch the news and they hear an expert say something and they extrapolate that to mean something for themselves. Something that's happening 8,000 miles away in a different country, in a different hemisphere, in a different time zone. And they say, that could happen to me. I should be really concerned about this. That's not a healthy response to something that might still be kind of fearful. But it's not going to happen to you or it's not going to happen to us. That's when you're starting to look at, do I have some disordered thinking about these types of things? Is this a rational fear?
Okay. And Andy, our goal is not to be fearless because we're not Navy SEALs, right?
Exactly.
But we need to try to be more just courageous.
Yes.
And ask God to help us be bold and courageous because he did not give us a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power, love, and self-discipline.
Absolutely. And even a Navy SEAL will tell you, if you're fearless, I don't want to work with you.
Okay.
Because if you're someone who doesn't experience any fear, you're probably a lunatic. Why would I want to go and fight in a war with somebody who's fearless?
You're going to take risks that might be dangerous.
Exactly. Okay. They're going to take risks. And there's a lot of people in this world. Remember those old stickers on cars and shirts? No fear?
Oh, yeah.
That was a ludicrous movement because there are things we should be afraid of.
Yeah.
And we can't just live our lives fearlessly in terms of being irresponsible with how we use our bodies and how we use our minds and the things that we say. You know, just think about if you went through life and said, I don't care what anybody thinks. I will always say what I want. I will always do what I want. That's going to be a very difficult person to be around because they will act selfishly or they will take risks that could put you in harm's way. That's not people you want to be partnered with necessarily, especially if you're, a Navy SEAL or somebody who is relying on a teammate.
Andy, I don't know about that no fear campaign and what that was geared for, but I think there was a certain quality that was saying, I'm going to take my brush with death because I'm going to take this skateboard and go over the Grand Canyon and I'll be fine. There was that no fear. And I think there was a certain disregard for life almost because kids were taking risks that were just silly.
Absolutely.
Under the umbrella that there's no fear. And to me, that was quite stupid.
Yeah. And it's a very interesting line. You think of like parents or caregivers who are watching over children. Young children, they don't understand risk as well. When they're 4 or 5 years old, they see something on TV and they want to imitate it, right? They want to jump off a couch or jump off a dresser or maybe jump off of the playground equipment because they've seen a superhero movie and they see that, well, the Guardians of the Galaxy can do flying things, so I could do that too, right? Yep. Well, a 14-year-old knows that's make-believe. A 4 or 5-year-old maybe doesn't. They don't have that sense of fear yet. Well, they will when they land because they'll learn a lesson, right? And so there's conceptual things and lessons that we have to learn. And, some of that's just developmental, what we learn, what we should and shouldn't be afraid of. I don't want to raise kids that are afraid of everything because then you raise adults who don't know how to handle fear when it happens to them. But at the same time, you don't want the opposite. You don't want people to be fearless. Right. You don't want to be too fearful. So there's a balance in the middle that not everybody can find easily. Yeah.
Great comment from Faith Family text that says, what does it look like to cultivate a healthy fear of the Lord? An interesting verse. It is a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Hebrews 10:31.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I've always found that to be a really interesting concept, the fear of the Lord.
The complete reverence and awe and wonder and holiness. Yeah. And he's God and we're not.
Exactly.
That to me is pretty easy.
Yeah. And it is. I've never felt a sense of fear of God in terms of I'm scared of God. Like I'm scared. It's that fearful respect of I know God has the ultimate power and authority over me and he could wink me out if he wanted to.
Of course.
for no reason.
Yeah.
And there's a tinge of fear. You know, it's kind of like when C.S. Lewis wrote about Aslan. He's dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I don't remember the text because this just came to my mind, but there's a passage in one of the Narnia books about Aslan. Is he safe? No, he's not safe.
No.
Not even remotely close.
No.
You don't want to make him upset with you.
Right.
And I think that's such a great way of explaining who God is.
Yeah. Annan from the Faith family said, I asked Jesus to take my negative thoughts captive because he is way more powerful than I am.
That's fantastic.
That is awesome.
Yep.
All right, we're going to take a break. Dr. Andy Schuttinga is my guest. We're talking about the psychology of fear. And if you have a question or comment, send it over. 877-933-2484. Receive a daily email featuring a scripture graphic. Sign up for this first of the day email at myfaithradio.com. Dr. Andy Schuttinga is my guest. We're talking about the psychology of fear today, and I really have appreciated some of the comments that have come in from Faith family folks, so thank you so much for that. How about this, Andy? Any tips for dealing with what-if thinking or all or nothing thinking?
Yeah, that can be hard. That can be hard to deal with, and that's kind of one of the hallmarks of anxiety is what-if thinking and letting that get out of control, where you're constantly thinking, well, what if this happens? But then what if that happens after that? And I think probably the best way to handle what if thinking is to try to stop it as soon as it begins. As soon as you recognize I'm going down the path of what if, just tell your mind, just say, okay, stop thinking that. And work on thinking of something different, either change your what you're thinking about, or you could also kind of attack that problem by saying, well, what if it does happen? And then coming up with a plan in case that does happen. You know, sometimes it's not a terrible idea to say what if and think, I actually don't know what I would do if that happened. Maybe I should come up with a plan.
Yeah.
What if I lose my job and run out of money? Well, what if you do? Think about have a reasonable plan. So you can answer that question and say, yeah, well, I thought of the what if, and I have an answer for it. I mean, you could do that too. That's a good way to engage with your thinking and kind of shift the tone of what you're actually thinking about.
Yeah. All right, here's a question. Andy, could you further clarify our instinctual safety-based fear response against other things like anxiety we just call fear? The gift of fear was very helpful in clarifying this for me. So I think the question is,
you have to read that to me again.
We've got our instinctual safety-based fear response.
Sure.
All right. Can you clarify the difference between that and other things like anxiety we just call fear?
Yeah. Okay. I see what you mean. Yeah. Anxiety and fear are often tied together as the same sort of thing. And I would offer that fear is a short-term situation. Anxiety is a long-term situation.
Okay.
So that's really the clinical difference between fear and anxiety. Fear is,
and you're done with it.
That was scary.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm so glad that car didn't hit me.
Right. Okay.
Okay, I'm okay.
Yep.
I'm going to keep driving. I go to work and I don't think about it again until I go home and say, guys, you know what happened to me? This guy almost T-boned me in the intersection, but I made it.
Right.
Anxiety is when you get in your car the next morning and you think, I hope I don't have that happen again. And you get to the intersection and you look 3 times extra because you're so afraid someone's going to hit you.
Well.
And you go to the next intersection and you're worried somebody's going to hit you there. And for the next 3-4 days, you're constantly thinking about that accident that almost but didn't
Isn't that normal?
happen.
Isn't that normal?
Maybe for some people it's normal, but I would recommend you don't do that.
Okay.
Because that's how you can become anxious about something.
Okay.
Nothing happened.
That's true.
So why worry about it? It's not probably going to happen again. Could it? Yes, but is it worth spending time thinking about it over and over again?
Yeah.
I don't think that's the best response to that.
I've got this little theory, Andy. Tell me what you think about it. which I call my perception zone versus my reality zone.
Ooh.
Now, my perception zone is you have to get a root canal or something, and you spend 3 weeks in advance of the appointment fretting about it, worrying about it. That's the perception zone.
Yeah.
It's going to be terrible. I'm going to,
Yeah.
Then you go and do it, and the dentist says, all right, all done. And you're going, that's it? Now, the reality zone was nothing.
Right.
But the perception zone was 3 weeks of little stories telling yourself that it's going to be terrible.
Anticipation.
So how do we shorten the perception zone down so it doesn't extend too far away from the reality zone?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. I really like that.
Oh, thanks.
That's a cool theory.
I came up with that a long time ago.
That's really intuitive. I like that one a lot.
I just need to spend less time in the perception zone.
We do.
Yeah.
And it can go both ways. You can be thinking of something really positive that's coming up. Like, I can't wait for this concert that I've been wanting to see. And here it's coming in 3 weeks. It's going to be so great. And then you go and it's like, wow, that was a disappointment.
No kidding.
It can,
or vacations. This is going to be the best vacation ever.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. It can work both ways. So anticipation is actually a pretty pleasurable activity for most people.
It is.
Thinking of things. And honestly, I think when we're anticipating something negative, we can probably get a little bit of juice out of that too. You might feel some sense of fear and then you're like, oh, I'm going to be okay. But 3 weeks ahead of time of a root canal, it's probably not a great plan or very helpful to start worrying about it. And if you find yourself doing that, then here's where a positive self-talk can come in handy. Say, hey, I don't need to worry about this right now.
We'll just see how it goes.
Yeah.
Let's just see how it goes.
Or there's nothing I can do about it in the meantime.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do anything to prepare for a root canal.
Yeah.
Or, whatever it is that's coming up.
Sure.
Maybe you have to do public speaking if you don't like that. Thinking about it every day and worrying about it, it's just not a helpful way of coping.
Yeah. Just spend time preparing for it.
Prepare for it.
Yeah, and pray about it.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, prayer for sure.
All right, Andy, with fear, this is a question from a faith family member.
Yeah.
With fear, does having some self-compassion for the part of you that is trying to protect you help calm it down versus being afraid of how your body is reacting and not accepting it?
Yes.
How do you deal with health anxiety, for example? Should you thank that part of you that's trying to protect you with self-compassion, pray Scripture, and give it all to God, and trust He will handle it?
Yeah, listener, I think you nailed it.
Okay.
I really do. Yeah, it's be compassionate to yourself, of course. If you have a major surgery coming up, it is okay to worry about that. I don't want anybody to get the impression you should never worry about anything. I think you should.
Well,
to some degree.
Yeah,
right?
Have concern, be prayerful, but the worry word is something I think we all got to work on.
Yeah, and the part of you that wants to be forgiving and understanding, that's great. I think that's a really healthy response to say, I am really worried about this, but that's okay. I'm not a terrible person, and it's okay to be having some fears and have some worry.
Yeah.
We just don't want to let it get out of control.
What's something you worried about longer than you should have? Not to put you on the spot. But look at me. I just put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I'm probably a terrible example for this segment because I'm not much of a worrier. Okay. I'm more on the flip side.
You really are. I've gotten to know you enough to know that you are really speaking the truth right now. You kind of roll with the punches.
Yeah, which can be honestly, that can be problematic too.
Okay.
Because sometimes you might need to get something done, and I don't worry about it. You know what I mean? Half the listeners are like, "Oh man, that is totally me."
Andy, what are we talking about today? I don't know. Don't worry about it.
I don't know. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Yeah. There's that can be a really beautiful thing to have.
Yeah.
Sometimes because when things go crazy, I'm usually okay with that, and I can be pretty calm and not get too worried about it, and that can be really a steadying influence for people around me. At the same time, I have forgotten things to do because I didn't worry about it enough, or I've done a poor job on something because I didn't have enough worry about, well, what would this look like if I didn't do it well? Mm-hmm. And then I didn't, and it made me or somebody else look really bad.
Yeah.
So that knife can cut both ways. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I can't think of the last thing I was like really anxious about.
Okay, that's an honest response. Thank you for that. Dr. Andy Schuttinga has been my guest. We've talked today about the psychology of fear. So if you missed any of it, you can head over to the podcast and check it out from the beginning. I want to leave you tonight with Matthew 6, Verse 34, therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. Have a great night, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.